Outer Orange.
I thought it wasn't possible. I thought it couldn't be done. I honestly thought that there was no chance that this deck could actually perform well. And boy, was I proven wrong. Last time I played Vanguard, oh my god, did he actually say no guard? What? What? Now guys, you know me. I like messing around with some funny, silly decks sometimes, and you know, sometimes I truly believe that like I just build straight copium sometimes, and I'm okay with that. I like building copium, but this time we did not build copium. This time we built an actual good deck, and this deck has been so bad for so long, and I actually don't even think it's been that bad. It's just that people have been so focused on what's meta that this deck has been literally under the radar this entire time for probably literally everyone. As you guys know, there's a card named Lutetia. It is the new lyrical set 3 card, and I read that card and I was like, wow, this sounds familiar. It sounds like something something that happened in set 2 a while ago called FORTIA. FORTIA has almost the exact same skill, just a different condition to get to the restand. However, FORTIA is insanely fast in terms of getting her condition, and I never really realized that, and I looked at her and I was like, hey, I could build this. Go ahead and talk about this deck. What does it do? It's really just a restand deck, and we're kind of going to go into it. I'm going to explain to you guys as much information as I currently have on the deck, and just FYI, I'm not entering BCSs anymore. However, if I was, I would probably bring this deck just because of how good it is, and it's so strange to me to say this because it's such a simple deck, and yet it just performs so well, and it actually scales insanely well and insanely fast. And with the set 3 cards, this deck actually got better. It plays similarly to Kyrie, but even better. And I've been shocked for the last like 3 or so weeks as to how well this performs. I can't wait to share with you guys. Let's go ahead and talk about it. I know I've been ranting. Let's go ahead and start with the ride line. Then we're going to go into the triggers and go from there. Deck box wise, we got Ballista as the main deck because this is where my Kyrie stuff was for the box. And then for the sleeves, I got the reindeer sleeves going on here, and then I have some old school G sleeves. So you want a starter, it doesn't matter what starter you run. You can run any starter on the planet. It's really just, you know, whatever you're in the mood for. This is what it looks like. That's what we want to run the grade 1 Mimish. This is the beginning of the FORTIA. Now I will say there's actually 2 ways you can build the ride line. I'll tell you guys both ways after I'm done talking about this ride line. There's 2 different approaches and both work pretty well. I still prefer this route just because of the rush this provides. So her first skill says that she's a friend unit. Pretty much if there's a card in the same column as her, they both become friends. That's pretty important for what you're going to be doing. And then when she's rode upon by the grade 2 Mimish, which is this card right here. When she's run by this card, you pop her out. And you can put her anywhere, by the way, and you know, the friend skill is activated because she is also a friend. So you kind of want this because 1, it's a free card to the board, and 2, you get the friend skill active with her, which means that you will pretty much have the friend skill active like the minute you go into your turn 2, which is usually your grade 2 turn. It's really, really strong because normally you want to set up so you can start bouncing stuff, you can start doing some crazy stuff. So this is just a really awesome option. Some run this and then run the Kyrie ride line. That's kind of what I was going to get at. Some people run the Kyrie ride line over this, but I actually find a hard time. I played the Kyrie ride line originally and I didn't really like it as much. I prefer this. So next we have the grade 2. When this rides upon this pops out, but this has a skill. If you have a friend column, if you have any units and friends, you get to ride to FORTIA for free. That's very, very important. And her skill says if you have another friends, when you would ride Mimish FORTIA from your ride deck, you can ride without discarding a card from hand. This is huge because this lets you not have to worry about discard. This gets you a free card to the board, and this says you don't have to discard, which is an insanely good combination when you actually ride to 3 because you actually have to discard on FORTIA. And originally when I was looking at this deck, I was like, oh, that seems so heavy, all this discard, all this that. But then, you know, I read this card, I was like, wait a second, you don't discard at all, which is freaking amazing. So when you ride to FORTIA gives you a couple skills here. This is also a friend skill, but this will never come up because this will always, I usually want to put this behind Van. It's really rare when you put it anywhere else, so this will usually never come up, but it is a friend's card, just something to keep in mind. Anyway, so FORTIA has 2 skills. One skill is that she can be a friend of Vanguard or Rearguard Circle. This is actually very important. If in case you're starting to brick a little bit or something, you can actually choose to call her as a Rearguard Circle, and yes, you can bounce her back now in this deck. It's set 3. Set 3 you can't do that. Set 3 you can actually bounce her back. So in case you do need to call her, you can. She does have the double skill. The other situation is if you're really, really stuck and you have no choice but you want to restand, then you definitely can actually call her the Rearguard Circle and she will still apply the friends for that column. Now she has a secondary skill. Her skill says at the end of battle she attacked if you have pretty much a full board of friends, pretty much something like this. You have like three back row rear guard circles. The friend's condition is active. So what you do is you counterblast discard a card standard. She gets 5k and you lose a drive. Essentially, this plays like Overlord. If you are familiar with Kagero, Overlord, anything Dragon Empire, this is essentially the same concept. There's nothing. It's actually so samey that I thought this deck was going to be so bad because it's pretty much a copycat of another deck. But its conditions rely on you having a board, and that sounds terrible, right? It sounds like, God, why would you ever want to play a deck that requires you to have 5 rear guards on the board at all times? Well, because 1, you're getting free advantage, and 2, if you're not facing retired decks, you don't care, and 3, even if you do facing retired decks, this deck does actually have the capabilities of bouncing, and because of that, it just doesn't matter. And then combined with other cards, you just actually stop caring. I thought the retired stuff mattered too, and then I realized it actually doesn't. But that's pretty much the ride line. You can run the grade 1 Kyrie card and the grade 2 Kyrie card. I believe it's Nanami and Kiyomi or something like that. The grade 1 says if you discard a grade 1, you can call it to the board, and the grade 2 says you can bounce a card after battle. You can run those. However, overall, I actually think these are better, but if you want to go super defensive, if you don't want to play the offensive game, you can play the other cards, and if you don't want to feel too fragile, you can do that, and it's perfectly fine. I do think this approach is a little bit better, but I understand the Kyrie engine as well. It does work pretty well. It also confuses your opponent, as if you change the starter to make your opponent kind of think you're playing Kyrie and then swap into this, and they won't see it coming. They also won't deny you. There's something that people can try and deny you of this because it's a Karen Blast. If you play carefully, you should never be denied, but in case you are, being on a Kyrie ride line, usually people won't think about that, but once you go into this ride line, if they know what this card does, they'll start thinking about it. But anyway, that's the ride line. We're gonna go ahead and put it to the side right here. Let's go talk about our 3s. Our 3s are very basic. It's just 3 Persona ride. There is another grade 3 Friends card. You don't need her anymore. I don't recommend running her. She is actually just a dead card. She only bounces herself. There's just better cards that just replace her now, so you just don't need it. So all you need for grade 3s is just these 3 cards right here. So let's talk about the 2s. There's quite a bit to talk about the 2s because the 2s and the 1s are kind of what carries the entire deck along with, you know, hitting triggers. So let's go ahead and start with Melty. So this is Melty right here. We all kind of know what Melty does. It's actually meant for this deck, but people play it at Kyrie in actually a lot of decks just because of how generic our secondary skill set is. Her first skill says if there's another card in a column, both columns become friends. Both cards become friends. So essentially, this gives you the friend ability, which is very important. You want to run friends cards because if you don't have friends cards, you actually can't do much. So this is that first part. And the second part says when placed during main phase, you can counterblast, call a card, and draw a card, which is super important. It means you'll see your pieces faster. Also, it's just nice to just go through your deck a little bit faster. It's just overall a good card, and you'll always have something to call. It does force you to call, so keep in mind if you want to set up, you always want to set up in a way where you can bounce your stuff back, so call the right cards type of thing. But sometimes you just want to use the skill just to dig through your deck deeper. Perfectly fine. Sometimes you won't use this card too often. It is a counterblast, and because it's a counterblast, you always want to prioritize this one in case you're down a counterblast or whatever. This deck doesn't countercharge. There is a countercharger, but she's not very good in my opinion, and even there's a couple other counterchargers that are generic. I don't think they're needed. I think you're fine with just the Melty and the Fortia doing your counterblast work. So this is another friend card. Her first skill, of course, says if there's a column, as a unit's column, it becomes friends. Second skill says if your opponent's grade 3 or greater, when she attacks, you get 2k for each of your other friends. So pretty much she becomes a 10k beater. You'll always have 5 other friends on the board, which means she just becomes insanely big. She just gets huge. She's 10k, she's 20k on her own, 30k under Persona, and under a booster it can be 38 and above. So it gets really, really high. Now, the next card is the card that is really changing how this deck works, and it's the reason why you don't want to run the grade 3 that's a friend card anymore, and it is Roxelia. If you have been near me in the last 48 hours or even the last week since I've pretty much started playing this deck, this is the card that I've been talking about the most, and the card I'm looking for FFRs the most. But this is Roxelia. Here she is. This is another friend card, which is another reason why this card is so good. So she has the friend skill, and then the other skill says that when she attacks a Vanguard, if you have 3 or more other friends units, she gets 5k power. But that's not the important part. The important part is here. If you have 5 or more, choose one of your rear guards with the friend ability not in the same column as this unit, and you may return it to hand. So ideally, you can return your Persona. You can return Melty. You can return this. You can return, there's a couple grade 1s you can return. Now keep in mind, it sounds kind of like whatever. It's like, oh, you get to return 1 card. Woo. Oh, you get to reactivate Melty. Woo. It's not that. It's more so the fact that you're denying your opponent swinging into rear guards. Because you usually want the counterblast. You're also denying your opponent by trying to retire the cards you need. So in case you need Melty or this or whatever on the board that's important, they won't be able to get to it since you're bouncing it. And last but not least, the 5k is just really nice. And we have another card that will be coming out that will actually bounce her too. So pretty much what happens is your front row will always be empty. And that's important because, again, your opponent can't touch you. They have to swing to Vanguard. And it's 2 cards that will usually be friends cards that your opponent just can't have access to. So all you're you have to worry about is your back row, if your back row is ever touched. Your back row is touched, that's the only place you got to worry about to replenish your rear guard. The 5k is also super, super nice, and it's just really good setup. You do have to plan around this card, since it does have to be 5. This will usually be your last attack, so you really need to make sure that you're not bouncing cards before you swing with this card, because once you do that, you lose the ability to bounce something, so just something to keep in mind. But you can set up really nicely. You can also bounce, by the way, the grade 1 from the ride deck if you ever have a need to. You can do that. I had one game where I did do something like that. Very rare time, but there is times where you can actually bounce the grade 1 wherever you put it. You can bounce it back and then reset up your board to where you can put the offensive powers behind Van, you know, move your board around a little bit. It's actually really convenient. But yeah, that's the 2s. So we talked about the 2s. Let's go ahead and talk about the 1s. Probably the best part of this deck. Just absolutely breathtaking, amazing cards here. We're actually going to start with Eileen. Now, a lot of people do not run this card in their decks. Instead, they run the friends card. She's not an actual friends, but she supports friends. Her skill says when a friends card is placed in the same column as her, this includes calling over her, by the way, you can counterblast and draw a card. That sounds really good on paper until you realize that it's actually just not very good at all. The draw is super nice, but it's a counterblast, which means that you have Melty, FORTIA, and that card to counterblast with. Usually 9 out of 10 times you'll be pitching that card, honestly, because it just doesn't function that well. The other thing, when you draw into it, it's a super feels bad when you're trying to find a friends card, and overall I just found that the card is more clunky and in the way than is actually helping, whereas this card is always helping and you always want to see this card, and this card extends your drive checks. So something in Kagero, like Overlord and General, they don't have a card like this. They don't have a card that looks at top card and you can put it at top or bottom. But this card exists, and it makes those drive checks so much cleaner. You're pretty much extending your drive checks by 3 to 4, depending if you have 2 on the board or not. But pretty much what you usually want to do with her is you want to swing with your Van, check whatever, and then swing with one of your rears, see what's on top. If it's a trigger, put it back on top, and now your next Vanguard swing has a guaranteed trigger to hit. I had one game where straight up I looked at the top card, oh, it's the over trigger, put it back on top. Boom, bam, my Vanguard is now 100 million K. You know what I mean? So this card really sets up well. It sets up well for heals. It sets up well for defenses, because you can actually swing with her, have this as your last attack. You'll get top card, oh, it's a heal, put it back on top. Oh, it's a defense, I'm at 3 damage, cool, put it back on top. Now when I damage check, I have an instant defense. You can do like these little things with her that just makes her so good, and I feel like in this deck it works even better. This and Kyrie utilize this card the best, but I am starting to absolutely love this card. I know it's a little bit heavy on the cost. This is not a cheap card to grab, but it definitely does the work. You can replace this with the Kyrie grade with the friends card if you're really desperate for money and you just can't afford it. That's perfectly understandable, but I will say this is definitely the way. But along with that, we are not done with the crazy grade 1s. We also run Yukiya. Now Yukiya is another card that helps with that bouncing situation. So you can have Yukiya boosting this grade 2 right here, and then this grade 2 will bounce the one front row, and then Yukiya will bounce this card, which means, again, as I mentioned earlier, you're never going to have an issue with losing your friends cards. It's just not going to happen anymore, and if people snipe this, you don't usually care. It also gives a little bit of power, which is nice. It's just perfect to where it makes your numbers more annoying to guard. Under Persona, this gets pretty annoying and obnoxious, and your opponent has a tough time guarding. So just overall, just a really amazing card. And then, you know, you start falling back into other cards, like when you don't see those cards, you start falling back into, again, your power gainers. This is a 10k pretty much at all times. She's pretty much always a 10k as long as there's another card with her. So this is a 10k booster. You can put it behind Van. You can do whatever you want with it. It's just 10k booster at all times. Another card with friends in this name. So of course you definitely want to run this at max copies. You want to see this ASAP. I know some people actually cut back this grade 2 for another Yukiya. You can do that, but I really think just seeing your friends units is that important. Even though there's a ton of cards that do it, you still just want that slot, plus that grade 2 just gets so massive in power. I think I'd rather cut back on Yukiya, but that's just me. You can do whatever you want. I think early on the pressure is just so high, because you can start this on turn 2, by the way. There's no skill on it that says your opponent's Vanguard has to be grade 3 or greater, any of that kind of crap. So you can start doing this on turn 2, which is actually amazing. So that's why I just think having as much friends units as possible is just good, because it makes her skills go online as well. Just overall really banger stuff, right? And then last but not least, we do have the 3 perfect guards and then the 1 Blitz Sentinel. This card, you know, is obviously very important and really good. I had a Lonero matchup recently, which was also, you know, can be a very scary deck, and this card just really goes around it very easily, makes your life just so much easier. It's literally 1 turn of just BS that you don't have to worry about anymore. That's pretty much the grade 1s, and honestly, that's pretty much majority of the deck here, right? All we have left is triggers. Now triggers are interesting. You kind of have a couple approaches when it comes to triggers. You can run it a couple ways. I'm running it like this because I just got so accustomed to Flagberg that it's hard for me to not run it like this. It just feels so nice. There's one thing I'm going to note. Draws in D just feel so good. But first we're going to start with the triggers, with the crit triggers. So we're running, sorry if the light's a little off, but we're running four crits of this is the Kyrie crits, and then running 3 more of just regular crits, so 7 crits total. And then of course we are running 4 very beautiful draws. These are the 10k draws. And my camera stopped focusing. My camera began focusing again. These are the 10k draws. This is the Transparent Snowy Knight. This card is just amazing. There's so many games that I've had where I just check a defensive draw, I stack a defensive draw, I offensively stack a defensive draw, and it always feels so good because you'll start with such a low hand and your hand will just out of nowhere become 12 cards, and it feels amazing. There's never a time where you don't want to hit this. It just always feel good. Like, yes, crits are nice, but this just feels better. Some run fronts. I have seen a couple lists from like back in the day that do run fronts. I'm not against them. However, it lowers your chances of like surviving longer. I know it has 20k shield on it, but you'd be surprised. You have to you usually have to pitch your triggers a lot. And you will see me pitching perfect cards and stuff too early on. It's pretty wild, actually. So yeah, pitching these is just so much easier in that aspect. So pitching fronts feels so much worse. And like I said, checking these, it just feels so much nicer. If you're using retired decks, those fronts just don't matter anymore. It is nice. Checking the fronts does make everything go higher in power, but I still think this. I think the draws are just better. Last but not least, I am running 2 counter heals. These are the crit ones. These are the crit ones down here, and then I'm running 2 regular heals. I think you can kind of experiment with this however you want. I haven't had this come up too often. I have faced like Garvidia like once, and it wasn't like it didn't make a difference too much, but you know, that first turn, you know, I usually always hunt for a PG before then, so you know, hopefully I see a perfect card by then, so it doesn't matter. This deck goes so fast, like it goes so freaking fast that sometimes the games just end before your opponent even sees their win con. So I haven't actually had the chance to use these that much. I actually might go back to just the regular heals just because I feel like that 15k shield just is that important. But you know, if you really think you're gonna see meta constantly back and forth, you may wanna you know, go to these. There's also the other ones, the restanding ones. They're also pretty good into decks like Flagberg or decks like Nirvana. You do want that 25k shield. It is pretty nice. So it's up to you how you want to do it. And of course we have the over trigger. I am running Esperanza as my OT. You know, you can do whatever OT you want. Seeing this top card feels freaking amazing. Card is pretty nuts. If you hit the over trigger, it's actually pretty lethal. But other than that, that's pretty much the main deck profile. Sorry if the lighting is like a little weird. I'm sorry if I'm a little too excited. I really just want to talk about this deck. I do want to show you guys what a turn 2 play looks like because it's super important. You really want to mulligan for that, and I just want to show you guys kind of sort of what it looks like. And maybe we'll even just do a test game. Maybe we'll just do a whole test game, but I still want to show you guys the turn 2 play just because it's just so important. But while I'm shuffling, I'll tell you guys I had a Leticia match recently actually. And the person I faced actually checked over trigger, and I was like, oh man, you know, they have, you know, 20k buffs on all their rear guards because, you know, front row, back row. They do the same thing I do because Leticia and FORTIA are just so similar. You know, it's just one of those things where it's like the OT I feel like really matters in that matchup. But surprisingly enough, I somehow made it through. I did go first. I was able to ride well there on 2. I hit a crit. I pushed him really fast to pretty much 4 damage, and they had very little shield, no PGs, and they died. Even with checking the OT and deck ending with the soul charging, it did happen. So anything's possible. Don't ever lose faith. All right, so I did manage to find some dice, so we're gonna roll for who goes first. 3. Opponent is going first this game. All right, let's go ahead and do our mulligan here. So we're gonna do 2 top 5 cards. See what we get here. Pretty good hand actually. So we're gonna keep these 3, and we're gonna send back the 2 triggers. Draw into, oh, okay, that's a lot of Roxelias, but I guess we'll roll with it. You know, no big deal. So yeah, we have our friend's condition already, so that's pretty awesome. So we can just roll with that. Opponent goes first. They ride up, do their thing. Here's our hand. The 3 Roxelia, a LT, and an Eileen. So we'll drop the crits. We'll ride for going second, draw another card, and we'll just swing here. The opponent will do whatever. We give a Yukia. They give us 1 damage. It's a crit, power to fan, and we draw. We have a PG. We'll discard the heal here. while riding, we'll use the 2 skill here to then pop this out like that. And then we'll go ahead and kind of go a little ballistic here. So we're going to use Melty skill, Counterblast, call Roxelia, and then draw a card. We drew into a perfect guard. Now here comes the fun part, because this is what I was talking about that whole denial play. I can actually show it right here without actually having to separate this out. So pretty much you call your Kia here, and you call Eileen on this side. Everything is pretty much swinging for some pretty annoying numbers. Everything's 18. This only goes live when you're on grade 3 or greater, and when your opponent's on grade 3 or greater. So this won't be live yet, but you can start with Melty here. Swing, check top card, put it on top or bottom. We'll actually put it on the bottom. They'll do their thing. You swing here for 18. We got Melty for check, and then we'll swing Roxelia. Use Roxelia's skill to bounce the Melty. They'll do whatever, and then we'll use Yukia's skill to then Soul Blast and bounce back the Roxelia. Now, you'll notice that we are at 1 face down damage. In this situation, if we had rear guards, your opponent could try and deny. In this case, they can't. They have to pass turn if they really want a hard deny, but usually they won't, because they want to usually drive check. They went first, so they're going to do that. And by the way, this isn't friends right now. So we'll take a damage. Don't know if they'll do anything too crazy. In case they do, let's say we guard a little bit more. Then it's our turn. Now, because we have a friends card in our we're gonna draw a card. Because we have a friends column, we ride this card just straight up for free. Now, those 2 cards that we just had, guess what? They can come back. But we're actually gonna go for the double Roxelia play here, since we can't Melty anyway. So we're gonna set up 2 Roxelias. They each get 5k. Everything's in friends now. You're gonna swing with Van. You can choose to kind of, you know, boost or not. I usually don't boost on first attack because it's always like the scariest one, so people will super guard it anyway. So we'll do our checks. We do get a heal. Probably goes off. Well, you can put power to Van, you can put power to rear. Just for walls and giggles, we'll go ahead and put it on Vanguard, and then we'll do our second check. And it's a Persona Red, which will be perfect for next turn. Then we'll activate FORTIA skill. We will Counterblast. We'll drop a Melty here. We don't really need her. We'll be bouncing these cards back anyway, so no big deal. And then she restands, and then she gets an additional 5k. And now she's swinging for pretty much 36. Pretty lethal here, so you can actually, so you have a couple moves here. We do have the Eileen here, so you can actually just swing with Eileen. The Eileen boosted skill, look at top card. It is a crit trigger, so we're actually going to put it back on top. And we're going to leave that at that. This on its own is 23, so nothing too crazy. We won't use Roxelia's skill here because we'll actually use it here, so that way this one procs along with this. So we'll actually just leave that alone, and then we're gonna go ahead and swing with Vanguard. Now they kind of need to think how they're gonna guard here, because it's pretty clear that there's something up here, something scary, something that I need, right? But whatever they do, we do our thing. Depending where it goes, it will either go here, with the crit will go here, the power will go here, or maybe all decks will go here if they try to want to pass, whatever. Regardless, we're pretending that they did guard, we'll put it all here. Then you swing with this, use Roxelia's skill to again bounce the other friend unit, and then at the end of battle, you use this skill to then bounce this back to hand. And again, your opponent is stuck in a situation where they have to give you damage, even if they want to super deny you. Well, they're of course gonna probably give us damage. We got a crit. We'll probably go to 3 here. Maybe drops, you know, perfect guard. We actually have some pretty decent shield here. Can drop some stuff. Just make sure you're still holding onto like at least two cards. Like this is fine. Just something to kind of keep yourself moving. Then it's our turn again. We draw. We're going to Persona Ride now. Draw another card. Very, very good. Very busted. Now we have a 10k front because of Persona. And if you want here, you can kind of do a couple things. You can set up for like super lethal here. You can call this card out over this card if you want to set up. I'm gonna keep it kind of simple here. We'll go ahead and use Melty's skill. Counterblast 1, call Roxelia, and we draw a card. And we drew into another Persona, really good stuff. And then you just go in. Again, you're just gonna keep doing the same thing over and over again. You're gonna go ahead and swing here with FORTIA's. And your opponent, you know, will do whatever. We check the crit. We're going to put it all on Vanguard. Usually you'll want to put it all on Vanguard. It's usually where it's strongest. Do a second check, it's Eileen. And then again, we're going to use the same thing. And eventually this comes into like a very big thing of you just kind of do the same thing over and over again. We're going to go ahead and discard. This time we'll discard Eileen, actually. We don't really need any more Eileens because we have one on the board. And she restands. And now we can again go with the Melty skill, check top card. It is a Yukia, we'll put it to the bottom. And then you can go ahead and swing with your Vanguard. And now this is 21, 31, 41, and she has the 5k off of her own skill from the restand. So this is swinging for 46 at your Vanguard, at their opponent's Vanguard for 1 drive. So they'll do their thing, we'll check another Yukia, and then you'll swing with Roxelia, again applying the same skills, and then using her skill to then go ahead and bounce the Roxelia to hand. And then you just do this over and over again until you pretty much kill your opponent, and usually, especially if you're going first, they'll usually die really fast. We can go ahead and take one. Oh, a defensive draw, actually beautiful. You know, power to our van, we're now at 23k base. You can feasibly guard. I actually checked, I drew it to a trigger here, so, you know, you can guard. You could PG here. I guess your opponent got some more. Drop your useless cards that you don't need. You know, all the stuff you don't need, just go ahead and drop it. You should be surviving. It really isn't too much that could kill you, especially like with the hand that we currently have. So we'll draw, we'll Persona Ride again, draw a card. This will probably be the last turn that I'll show you guys, but just again, just showing you guys kind of sort of how the deck functions. This setup, we do have this grade 2 now, so I'm actually going to call this grade 2 out. I'm going to call her here because Roxellia is a little bit smaller. And I'm going to call Roxel. Actually, I'm going to swap these two because we're going to be using Roxellia as our last attacker. So just something to keep in mind. We have the Persona again active. And then we can again go in for that 23 beefy number. If you really want to go super extra, if you really want to think you're going to kill your opponent, you can actually, instead of guarding with this, you can guard with that. Put this down here, make a magic number. So you can go ahead and go in 23, do your check. Oh, that's an over trigger. Draw a card. I drew a heal, by the way. Massive power can go here, and then we have a second check. We check nothing. Everything just got even beefier because if it wasn't beefy enough, it just got even stronger. We're going to discard and restand our girl. She gets 5k, but it doesn't matter. You can kind of pick where you want to put it. If you know they're out of perfect cards, you can actually put it on here, on Vanguard. But if you know they may have a perfect card, you can put it on one of the rears. We're going to swing again. They're going to do their... Actually, no, we're not going to do that. I'm going to swing this way first, check top card, put Eileen to the bottom, that's our top, and then you're going to swing with Vanguard here, and this, if without the over trigger, it's actually 23, 33, 38 with the skill, and they do their thing, and we don't check anything too crazy, and then last but not least, again, bounce this card, and then use the soul to go ahead and bounce this card, and that is pretty much the full deck right there. That actually, surprisingly enough, this was literally just a test game, and everything went exactly how I want to show you guys how it's going to look. This is precisely how you want every single game to go. We saw the Eileen, we saw the Yukiya, we saw some boosters, we saw friends units. Nothing was really going against us there. There was actually, we saw Personas too. This is ideally probably one of the best things to do. This is probably the best game scenario could happen. I promise I didn't script this or anything. I just literally showed my deck in front of you guys. But another thing you can do, another thing that I realized, I do want to talk about this, in case you don't have, say you don't have a friends unit in hand, but you do have this in your hand, and you know Persona is important, you can actually choose to just call her out, and then you can swing with her, and then swing with Roxellia, and Roxellia actually bounces to hand. This is a friends unit, and sometimes you are forced to call it out. It's a super rare situation when it happens, but it does happen sometimes. Just keep in mind, you can actually bounce your Persona back to hand, and then for next turn you can ride it. So something really juicy to keep in mind. And that's pretty much it. That's the whole deck. Super excited to show you guys this. I think this deck is insanely good. I don't know about best deck or anything crazy like that, but you can't really stop this deck's momentum. It's going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. It's probably one of the fastest decks right now in the format outside of Graffitia, because Graffitia can one-shot you because of the overtrigger specifically. Because of the overtrigger specifically, Graffitia can one-shot you. However, this deck, without even doing too much, you don't even need to hit overtrigger to just shut your opponent down really fast. You're not feeling the Kyrie. I would really recommend trying this out. This card is actually stupidly cheap. Actually, even the LSR is cheap. Like, if you're really into maxing decks or whatever, the other cards might be a little hard to max out, but in case you just want to max out your ride line, this ride line is actually really cheap. This is $1, this is $1, and even the regular version of her is like a $4 card right now. So, you know, if you really want to try going for a little bit of that small ride deck max rarity, this is one of the cheapest ride line decks right now. It is insanely cheap. I kid you not. And the LSR is $60 right now. It's like 60, 68-ish, something like that. That's really cheap for an LSR, by the way. This used to be like 200. So if you're really into just that little flavor of touch, you know, you can always pick up one of these. I'm not trying to flex it. I just legitimately think this card actually looks really beautiful. She used to creep me out. She doesn't creep me out anymore. She has been so nice to me that I can't, she's my friend now. Like, just like the deck, she's just my friend now. I can't call her creepy anymore. I just can't do it. But that, guys, we're getting the video here. I really hope you enjoy it. I hope you have fine success. If you do, please feel free to tweet, comment, do whatever. If you're one of the people, there's actually a very few people that have topped with this deck over in Japan. If you're one of those people, please let me know how you're doing and how the deck's working for you. I would love to hear your thoughts. This is such an underrated deck right now. It's literally in Eugene territory. But other than that, guys, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys in a future video, I'm sure. You guys will probably see Dear Days content for FORTIA as well, because I recently did a deck profile on it as a joke. But here I am actually making a legitimate deck profile because it actually performs well. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, peace out. Das vidanya. Bye!